Welcome, everybody, to the Denver Dzogchen podcast. I am here once again with Joseph Wagner and our very special guest, Richard Lang. We are here to do part two of our fun interview with Richard as we discuss the Headless Way. Today, we're going to get in a little more detail into what the Headless Way is and how it works. Maybe, Joseph, you can kind of segue into a good question for Richard to get us started.
Well, hello, everyone, and hello, Richard. Hello, Damien. Richard, thanks a lot for joining us. I know you're super busy, and I really appreciate you making the time, so thank you.
A pleasure.
I personally, when I came across the Headless Way, it was first through your website, but that was when it was, maybe you didn't even have the website then, actually. I think it was just an email exchange and forum kind of situation. That was like early 2000s, and or maybe before that. It was a long time ago. And I actually was first exposed to this through Douglas's book on having no head. And as I said in our last podcast, that first chapter of only 3 pages or whatever, and the pointing experiment, I was like, oh, they know, the same as when I had learned from my teachers. So what my question is what is the access point for most people when they come in contact with the Headless Way, or lack of contact, as the case may be? How does that start? How do these experiments work, and how did they begin? And all that stuff is what I'm really curious about.
Well, they began with Douglas Harding, and they began with the scientific spirit. I suppose a bit of background might be helpful here. Douglas Harding was born in 1909, and he grew up in a strict fundamentalist Christian sect called the Plymouth Brethren. And they had a lot of ideas about how things were. And at 21, he left, and it was a big deal. He was the worst case they'd ever had. He left because he couldn't accept their authority, that they had the right to tell him who he was and what was what. And so this was in the just as the Depression was starting in the West in 1930, or already happening. And he was training as an architect in London. And fairly soon he started a kind of project. He always had projects on the go as a boy. And I don't really know exactly what started it, but he got interested in himself. And he became very interested in the fact that he was made of cells, and that when he opened and closed his hand like this, billions of cells were working together. So it was a mystery to him how he was like a walking cell city. And then he realized he was like a cell in the body of society. So in other words, he was starting to question what it was to be a person. And he found that being a person involved being billions of little animals. And the animals were made of molecules, and he was part of society. So this was a project that was based on science, and on the spirit of science being, well, we have a hypothesis. What am I? I am a person. Well, let's check it out. And to cut a long story short, he understood that what he was, according to science, which was so different from what he'd been brought up in. What he'd been brought up in was revelation. This is true because the Bible says it's true, and you'll accept it. But that wasn't good enough for him. And this is why it leads into the experiments, really. What he wanted was to find the truth about himself, was what it boiled down to. And he discovered that what he was changed with range. So this is the idea of relativity, really, that he was a person, but at 6 feet, but at very close range he was cells, and even closer he was molecules, and even closer he was particles. Further away he was a city, a country, a planet, a star. So you're like an onion with layers. And obvious question is what is at the center of all the layers, because your appearance as a person, it isn't. It's peripheral. You've got it in the camera. If the camera's at, 2 or 3 feet from me, that's what I look like. But if the camera was further away or closer, you'd see a different view of me. And so he was really interested in all of this. And he was in India by this time. He'd gone there, got a job as an architect, then joined the army when the war came, Second World War. And during the war, he was really trying to work out what was at the center. And he knew the mystical ideas, there's nothing, full of everything, and those kinds of ideas. But it wasn't good enough for him to believe it. He'd had enough of believing.
Mm.
You can't really, I mean, how sure can you be on what you're told to believe? And then one day he just looked. He looked at his own body and he saw his legs. This is the first chapter of On Having No Head. Saw his arms, saw his torso, and looked down and noticed he couldn't see his head. And he understood that he was now looking at what he was at zero, not from 3 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet, 10 miles, 10,000 miles, but at zero. And so the essence of that is experimentation. It's attention to what is given and taking that seriously. You can't see your face now. So he spent the next 5, 10 years really working out how that made sense, you see. And he was with the experience of headlessness for 20 years before he shared it with someone. But the whole spirit of it is, let's put aside what I think, what I know, what I've been told, and I'm going to look for myself at what I am at zero. And this is genius, really. It is so simple. And people say, well, of course, I can't see my head, but I know I've got one. I say, well, how do you know you've got one? You see, that's the thing. What you know, that's the problem.
Mm.
And it's to be simple, utterly simple like a child, and to look again. And he, in his great books, especially The Hierarchy, puts forward a view of course, I've got a head, but it's what you see from there, you see, and what I see in the mirror. But what do I see at zero? Well, no one is in a position to tell me but me and you. So anyway, in the late 60s, he was going through different phases in his life, and he began to get a lot more contact with people who were interested in this. And he developed these ways of communicating this experience to others, which were there right from the beginning. If you say, well, look for your face, that's probably the simplest. But pointing came along in the early 70s. You point out at things, you see, and the viewer or the listener can try this. You use your finger and point at things, and you look at what's there, and you see it's an object. This is your Tibetan pointing out.
Pointing in, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then you turn your finger around and point back at where others see your head. You see, and that's pointing in, and you see nothing.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So when I met him in 1970, there were already some experiments, but I was part of that wave of people who hung out and just helped him make up experiments. And it was a very creative time and a lot of fun. And yeah. So that was the way in. And of course he kept, I'm going to turn my email off here. I should have done it before. Does that start us off there, Joe?
Yeah, very good. So let me just ask you a question. It's my own curiosity about the beginning of his discovery and how that became what is now the Headless Way. Obviously, he got it in a more organic or spontaneous way. In On Having No Head, he says he was in the Himalayas and he suddenly realized, that there was a big difference between what he thought he was and what the actual observer of the situation was. But what's the real truth? Because I remember you telling me that that wasn't exactly how it unfolded. Was it more a gradual unfolding for him in the, in the early days? That would have been the 30s, I guess.
Well, the first book he wrote was in the early 30s called The Meaning and Beauty of the Artificial, which was uh, really, well, it was all about this. And he had understood that he didn't stop at the boundaries of his skin, that he extended into the tools he used.
Mm.
And once he'd crossed that boundary between the self and the not self and saw that it wasn't an absolute boundary, that you pick up a pen and you extend into the pen, or you get in a car, you extend your body into the car, you use a phone, you extend your ear to hear on the other side of the planet and your voice to speak, across the planet. So that and in that book already he understood the layers, and that at the center of all these layers was a mystery that was incredibly creative. So that was there in the early to mid 30s.
Mm.
And uh, I've got a notebook of his. We're just putting together an archive of all these materials, which will be free online when we've done it. But yeah, there's tremendous amount. So I've got a notebook he wrote in 1942 and 43. He was taking a lot of notes about layers and mandala-like diagrams and all of this. And just at the very end of that, it's 1942 to 43, that notebook. I mean, he often dated things. And at the end are the first headless drawings
Oh.
in that book. And what I understand, what I think happened was because he first saw he was headless in February, March, April 1943, as far as I can work out,
Mm.
and he was up in the Himalayas. What I think happened was because the other side of the story is that he saw this picture by Ernst Mach,
Mm.
who was
Right.
a philosopher, and this picture is quite a well-known picture. And Ernst Mach was a philosopher, and he was a relativist, and it's a drawing, a headless drawing. He was exploring what it was to see. And Douglas saw that picture. So what I think happened was that he went up to the Himalayas for a break and to Darjeeling. And he'd been there the year before. And the year before, he'd done a fast for
Mm.
10 days. And I've got the piece of paper with all the details of the fast on it.
Mm.
And then in 1943, he went again and did a fast. And I think what happened was that he was on his own in this house. I mean, there was someone else probably with him going out to work, but Douglas probably spent the week fasting, and he wouldn't have been doing nothing. He'd have been reading. He was been reading and studying with this notebook, you see. And I think probably what happened was one of the books he took up there was this book with the drawing with by Ernst Mach in it. Because the first drawings, the headless drawings in that notebook, are not of Calcutta, where he was living. He's got a picture of him lying on a bed, but it's a first person picture. So you just see the shoulder, and out the window you see pine trees and mountains. You see, I mean, it's just it's just a sketch. So I think what happened was that while he was there, and of course, if you've ever done a fast, you get into quite light-headed states of mind. And he was studying and intensely working on this question of who he was at the center. And he saw this picture by Ernst Mach. And of course, then he would walk out the door and he'd be in the mountains or in the foothills, you see. So both were true. And I found in a book, when he wrote on having no head, he did a lot of study of Zen. And there's a book on Zen. I've got his books here in my library here. And in one of the books on Zen, there is that he read at the time he was writing on having no head. There's a passage about the kind of sudden flash of lightning of enlightenment, and underneath that paragraph he's written Darjeeling! Exclamation mark. So I think that you see he had quite a big experience there of emptiness, having been fasting, seeing this picture, going out the door, all of that. But of course, that was, he found what he was looking for, but it led to an enormous amount of philosophical work to work out how this made sense. And then he was on his own with it for 20 years. Then he began to share it. Then he began to develop these experiments for sharing it, which made it possible, easy for anyone to share it. It wasn't dependent on him. And they were very much, they were called experiments. He never really called them awareness exercises. They're experiments. You tested the hypothesis that you're not what you look like. You're not at zero, the same as you look like at 6 feet. So it's deep in the Western scientific tradition. And it is elegant and so kind of sane, you know.
Absolutely. Seems
So
to me,
Richard, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering what were the implications of this? It's kind of like in all the mystical traditions throughout the world, people have maybe a similar zero experience, but what that means in terms of how we live our life comes out very differently in each of the traditions. And so I'm curious, how did that unfold for him and for the Headless Way?
Well, he wrote 15, 20 books exploring what it meant. And the first book he wrote was The Hierarchy of Heaven and Earth, which is a new vision of our cosmos, really, and our place in it. I mean, that's just incredible, superb book. But after that, he wrote The Little Book of Life and Death, Head Off Stress, The Trial of the Man Who Said He Was God. Many, many books exploring the implications and applications in every area of life. And where to start, really? Face to no face. I have your face. I am empty for you. I am you. There's no boundary between us. That's a game changer, you know. I'm looking from the timeless into time, so I'm not in time. So death doesn't touch my true being. It'll touch Richard. Richard will die, but I won't. And so it's an awareness of that. One of the experiments is you turn around and you notice that you're still and the room moves. Or when you're driving, you can notice you're still and the scenery moves. So you're still and you don't go anywhere and your destination comes to you. Or now I'm speaking and I don't see my mouth, so my voice comes out of nowhere, my thoughts come out of nowhere. So this nowhere that I'm looking from, that we're all looking from, is creative and imaginative and productive. And so that one is deeply, deeply supported by this incredible, mysterious mystery at one center. So, tell me something that it doesn't apply to really. And his books there's so much in them. He was a very prolific writer. He was a good writer, and so if you're interested in that kind of in reading books, it is well worth looking into. Yeah.
it seems to me they're unlike so many spiritual, let's say spiritual geniuses, people who have this spontaneous insight. He didn't just keep it to himself. He really tried to work out the implications of this. And so that was the first phase, was his recognizing this situation. The second phase seems to be he was working it out philosophically. He started to publish books that were talking about this. Then he started to share it with others, and out of that came the experiments. And the latest phase is actually you, because it's without you, who knows what would have happened to the community, to the insights that he spent so much time managing. You've been really instrumental in spreading this and allowing people to realize that the truth is within their grasp. That's, I might have seen the insight from On Having No Head, which was published what, in the late 50s, is that right? I mean, it was a long time ago.
Early 60s, yeah, yes.
But I'm not sure that I would have followed up with it. I would have probably just stayed on the path that we have and thought, oh, that's an interesting take on it. But it seems that it's the impact on him, the waves are still going out. Now there's a
Oh,
worldwide community of people interested in
oh,
this, sharing it, and you've empowered so many to share it in a deep way. Amazing.
yes. I take the view people just do not realize what an incredible thing he's done, and it'll reverberate, and the waves will spread for many, many years. But I think everyone has a different path, don't they? And I, when I came across it, I just thought, oh my God, that's brilliant. That's what I was looking for. And oh my God, that's a brilliant way of sharing it. And that's so free of hierarchy, and it's so free of belief. And of course, I spent a lot of time with Douglas. He was a very good friend. So I got to, think everything through with him and talk and share and do workshops. But from very early on, I thought, I want to share this. And it came as a surprise, and is still a bit of a surprise in a way. Not. I thought, how come everybody doesn't want to share this, you see? And I look back, and I suppose I was a bit unusual in that I took up the torch. And now other people have done, but I've done it, as much or more than anyone else. Douglas once said to me, it's a great life. And I thought, it damn well is. I want to ride that wave, you see. And the more, and of course, uh, well, you learn so much, if you want to learn, teach, they say. You learn so much through communicating and finding out what you think by communicating and sharing. And Douglas always said, if you want it to grow in your life, give it away because it'll come back to you through your friendships and through what people share with you, and you'll be inspired. Anyway, it was just my path to want to share it, and that was always number one for me. And I kind of, I made a living, all of that, but a pleasure, a privilege, uh, and you learn. One of the things I've learned, it's so incredibly obvious. So you don't have to worry when you're sharing it with people. You talk to people as if they've got it, which of course you're looking out of nothing. And the sharing of it now, for me to say, well, I'm looking out of nothing, and you're looking out of nothing, and you're looking out of this boundless single eye, and you don't see your own face, instead you see mine, and you're not in the room is in you. Now, this isn't rocket science. And if someone says, well, I don't get that bit about the room being in you, I say, well, don't worry, it's words. How would you describe it? You see, so rather than having well, obviously haven't got it if you don't realize that you're not in the world is in you. You say, well, it's non-verbal, you've got it, you tell me, you see. And it is the most kind of fun thing. Um, yeah.
Well, it's certainly what seems to differentiate the Headless Way from so many traditions is the utter obviousness of the method and the ease of the transfer. It is almost impossible not to get it if you're in the presence of other people who get it and you have an open mind. I'm surprised how many people don't, but it is the case that that it is not difficult to recognize this, even though it's perhaps the greatest secret in history, right? It's quite a very freeing insight, that's for sure.
Oh, it is. And I think that uh, I think people, well, people have different needs in their lives and different interests. And where do we get those interests from? Well, we get a lot of it from society, if not all of it. You know, we think these are our own interests, but we've picked them up somewhere and other people are doing it. So why I'm saying that is that one of the things that really helped me was being with others who were aware of this and who were valuing it. And it rubs off on you. It's infectious. And I think that the more that it spreads, then the more people get drawn into it who wouldn't have if they weren't kind of being influenced. You know, we're very susceptible to influence, and good and bad. Well, I can see how it's a long game, but uh, the um, the kind of zeitgeist or the kind of what is assumed to be true does change over the centuries and over the decades. And seeing that your space for others, seeing that you have everyone's face instead of your own. I mean, it's so glorious. Seeing that you are big, that everything is within you. This is a wonderful setup, and it's true and observable. And I think that people just need to be nudged a bit and reminded, and it's being reminded of something wonderful and free and freeing. Um, and there's no hierarchy. That you can't get it wrong. You can't get it better or worse. Nothing, nothing. Um, it's always available. You don't have to kind of work on it in a way. I mean, you kind of do, but in another way, it's just given now. So yeah, I mean, you know, just to articulate face to no face, that yeah, such a beautiful thing, really. Yeah.
Amazing. I have a question. When you first got involved, so that was 70, I think you said around 70, on Having No Head was out there, and some of the experiments had been developed. Obviously the pointing, and I can't remember what else is in that book, the single eye, and some other ones. But you fell into this seemingly very small group of people who were just starting to explore this. How did you go about developing more experiments? Because, you know, in this vast tradition of Buddhism, there are actually fewer methods, it seems, than there are in headlessness, which is which is incredible to me. So I'm curious, like how they came about through, like, what were the means? Were they spontaneous insights, or someone came in and said, "Check this out," or how did that happen?
Well, when I met Douglas, there was not the pointing experiment
Oh,
yet.
I didn't know that. Oh,
No. And the way that that came about, there was a friend called Reggie who's passed away now. And one day, Reggie said to Douglas, "Oh, you know, you could point at it." So Douglas took it up. Yeah, we pointed it. There was that. And the the no head circle where you stand around and look down. So a couple of friends of mine, Paul and Joyce, Americans, they came on the scene a year or two after me, and they were living in Denmark at the time, and they had a couple of good friends in Denmark, and they used to go out walking, and because it was windy and cold, they used to huddle around in a circle to keep warm. And after they'd seen who they were, they looked down and saw all the bodies came out of nothing, you see. And that was the beginning of the no-head circle.
maybe you can
And
lead us through that one, just so people understand, because some of the people here are not going to be familiar with any of these experiments, I think. So,
well, I mean, if you're watching, if you look at my picture now, oh no, that's the different one. I used to have the no head circle. Well, you stand around in the circle and you look down and you can see the circle of feet, the circle of bodies. You have to imagine this because it's a group thing.
You're
But
standing
as you look
right
down,
on each other kind of thing.
yeah, you can put your arms around each other. And of course, when you look down, you can't see your own head. It disappears above your chest, you see.
Mm.
And as you look down, you can't see anyone else's head because you're looking down. And all you can see are the circle of bodies that fade out about waist or chest level, like your body does. And there are no heads at the top. There are a whole circle of headless bodies. And so, from that point of view, you can see that all the bodies disappear into the same space at the top as your body does, or comes out of that one space. So we say down there we're many, at the top we're one. And there are no dividing lines. It's just one consciousness at the top. Now, that is absolute breakthrough. I mean, it's a game changer again. That down there we're many. It respects difference, individuality, separateness there. But at the top we're one. At the top we're one. By the way, at the top we're one, everyone. You know, it's going to change how you relate to so-called others. And you can see it. You can't. It's not believing. It's every time people love it. And then what we did was sometimes you put a clock down in the middle. So
Mm.
you've got a clock on the floor and you can see the second hand going round. And that represents time, time and movement, time and change go together. At the top, there's no change, no movement. So you're looking from the timeless into time. We had a lot of fun making these up, um, and the experiments you see. I love doing them. And of course, I've done them thousands of times, but they're kind of fresh every time. And there's something new in them often enough. And it's not about proving you're headless. It's about enjoying it and having fun together, you know.
Do you run into, like, I've noticed in my life that there are some people who, because what you're really talking about is direct perception, right?
Mm.
There's some people who are just unwilling to step into direct perception because there's always a thought between the headless nothing and whatever they're perceiving, and they can't seem to remove it. You're like, no, but there's this thing, of course I have a head. They can't pluck the thought out.
Yes. Well, yes, of course I meet people like that. But I don't bother really, because I know they can't see their head, and I I suppose sometimes I will say to someone like that, well, let's back up. Let's not say I don't have a head. Let's just say I can't see my head, because I don't care how you put it, and I'm not going to waste time trying to prove the philosophy of it. Just noting can't see it, and if they say, well, it's just not for me. I said, fine. It makes no difference at all, essentially, whether someone agrees or not. It does make a difference in terms of friendship and what you can share. But I live as if they're empty for me. I live as if it's true for them, and I can't prove it, don't want to prove it. I enjoy it myself. And, the thing is that, I mean, someone has to be interested. If they're not interested, it is no point. But when I share it with someone, uh, I I'll just say, well, look, and I look at the person, you see, not intruding, but just look, and I say, well, look, I'm just enjoying now having being empty for you. I can't see my face. Instead, I've got yours. I'm just, well, I mean, it's the most loving, beautiful, kind, innocent thing just to look, you see. And if you see that they're not interested, well, then you stop. But it's people, anyone who likes that kind is just going to drink it in, aren't they? It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. So yeah, I, I think Jesus, when they couldn't catch the fish on one side of the boat, he said, throw your nets on the other side. Don't fish where there aren't fish. Don't talk to people if they're not interested in it. Just, yeah.
I've had many conversations with people who were interested, but they had that almost scientific materialist mentality that if you can't put it in an external experiment, because it's almost that assumption that you can have, you can remove the subject from whatever is happening, right? Like I love that they're using like experiments, and it's a almost a scientific method, but the difference is that in in science, or scientism, I should say, there's this idea that you could remove this whole experiment from any observer, that it exists somehow without somebody there to view it, and I've noticed that some people, that's a huge block. They can't, oh, I could just directly perceive that I don't see ahead. And that's how my experience is, even if I can't prove something in a laboratory to demonstrate that.
Yes. You see, I think that what I think is, as well as sharing the experience, my work is to share the work of Douglas Harding and the philosophy behind it. And that shift in world outlook or thinking, that shift in how we think, that takes decades, if not centuries. And what we're doing, what I'm doing, is making all that, his work, available so that eventually there's a shift at that level. And so then there'll be an understanding of why this is true. And all those views that, it's nonsense because I know I've got a head, will be old fashioned, because it'll be understood that what you are depends on the range of the observer, you see. And that, of course, I've got a head, but for you see, and for me, I don't. From there, and you have from here, and I reflect it back to you. So there'll be it's a very deep shift in thinking. And the people who are objecting haven't made that shift. And I don't blame them, but part of what I'm doing is to make available all the work Douglas Harding did so that it gets into the universities and gets into philosophy courses and it gets into the language and is understood as a much better way of understanding than the old way.
Mm.
So when people come up with those objections, it could be a very long conversation, which at the end of which nothing has changed. So I don't go there.
No, I
Yeah.
think that yeah,
Yeah.
it's not everybody is. I don't know. It sounds, if you say not everybody's ready, it sounds like they're inferior. That's not what I mean. But not everybody is interested, like you said, and we're all working out our personal view. And it does take a certain kind of wondering or doubt about these things we've learned in school to have the willingness to turn your consciousness around, look over here. That's what it really takes. And I've found in my experience, most people do have that willingness. Whether they have the willingness to look at the implications is a different thing. But it seems that most people in an environment like a workshop that you give, it's almost impossible. Let's say there are 20 people there, you might have 2 people resistant, and everybody else is like, wow. Whether those people, even the ones who say, wow, are going to do something with that, do something, meaning try to have their whole life perspective shift, you can't say. But it does seem that it's so available. It's so true. It's so
Yeah.
naturally true.
It
Yeah.
brings up for me immediately the psychedelic experience. The reason that is so profound for so many people is because it's an immediate change in that direct perception, so that it's kind of undeniable. So I can see that in some ways these experiments are almost like psychedelic experiences.
Oh, they are. They are. I mean, you're accessing direct perception. Yes. But you see, I think that in terms of people being interested and carrying on with it, um, I think that um, as more and more people enjoy it. And therefore, the obvious benefits of it become more apparent. That's what will, um, that is very much in its favor because it really does work. I mean, it works. You live a far richer, deeper life with it than without it. With not with something external, but with just being aware of who you really are. It's a mystery, and uh, I can see that, in a way, what most affects people is that seeing others where it's working so well. And people say, well, I want some of that. You see, where can I get more of that? Well, come and hang out, So it works at that level. More than at an intellectual convincing level, that doesn't happen. It's love, really. If you find that you're being with the people who are enjoying this are in some sense at peace, in some sense really welcoming, in some sense having a lot of fun, in some sense they've settled something inside themselves. They've come to rest, but this rest is energizing and it's not a withdrawal. It's a deep, deep engagement with life. So you think, wow, wow. That. I mean, I guess that's partly what attracts people to psychedelics. It seems like you've just had your energy turned on, and you're engaged and you're seeing the world well, when you're headless, it is like that, Damon. It in a certain sense. And then you find that with this experience of headlessness, openness, spaciousness, that you go back to some of the scriptures and you can understand what they're talking about. And you can also make up your mind about what is true and what isn't true about what they're saying. You're the authority on what it's like to be you, and you revel in that. You don't have to. Yeah, you're home. You're home. Yeah,
It
yeah.
does seem that it's the primary outcome or hallmark of understanding this is that you do become the authority. You do realize that no longer are you sort of on the outskirts of the mandala, so to speak. You're the very center of the mandala. And I find that that shift is probably the greatest gift that the headless way can give, because otherwise we're always under the influence of others. And it's not influence, not the right word, but we assume that because we heard it, it's true. And that is that we're all billiard balls rolling around on a giant pool table, banging into each other. And that is absolutely the opposite of the truth. And that really empowers oneself, which seems to be the very essence of the headless way, is that you're taking the focus off of what other people told you and relying entirely for a second on your own direct experience, which just so happens to be the opposite of what you thought it was, which is kind of mind blowing. At least it has been for me, and it continues to be. And for you, I mean, this is 50 years ago. This is more than 50 years ago you got involved in this.
Yeah, and I mean, just self-evidently now, what a wonderful thing it is to share. Uh, uh, we each of us, the three of us now, are aware of being space for each other, space for the world, being home, being still but full of movement, being in that timeless space that is full of time. And each of us is looking out of that place. I mean, it's so weird and wonderful, and that what you're sharing what is nearest and dearest to you with others, and there's no argument about it, and there's a different angle on it from your friends, a different tone of voice, a different, bring different things to it. That is so interesting and so intimate and so, uh, yeah, it's just a wonderful thing, and we're in different countries, but we're not. There's no distance, and we're all in the same big country, or whatever and so the metaphors are endless. Vive, the countless number of ways of singing about it, really. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And I'm here to say, to someone who says, I haven't got it. Well, I say, you can't see your head. Instead, you see the world. There you are, you see. Now stay with it. That's the thing. And how do I stay with it? Well, if you're listening to this, that's how you stay with it. You're hanging out with others, that you're following that interest. And when you look now and see the open single eye you're looking out of, you say, well, you can't half see that or see it a bit cloudy. You see, well, is that true? Look for yourself. You see, there you are, and there's no degrees, and yet you've got these feelings and thoughts going on in it. Now, do your feelings and thoughts disturb that space? You might say, well, I haven't got it because I feel anxious. Well, I feel anxious, but that it just it phase to no phase is anxiety to no anxiety. That's the truth,
Yeah.
and it's the truth that sets you free. It's not getting rid of anxiety forever and ever. And good luck if you think that's the case, because I haven't managed that.
Mm.
But I know, I see that my anxiety does not stop me from seeing the space and being the space. And then that helps with the anxiety, because it's not, I can't be kind of run over by it in a way, if I'm just being simple and humble enough to be with the way things are given rather than how I think they should be, you know. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Let me ask you this. It seems, I'm not a total scholar of the Headless Way, but it seems like most of the more powerful, the experiments that I'm familiar with that are the most powerful, were developed in the early days, probably around this creative period that you were getting involved in. There was a lot of energy and there were a lot of opportunities for new things, even as simple as just pointing, which obviously had not yet really occurred to Douglas at that time. That's incredible alone. How recently have any new experiments been developed?
Um, I don't really know. I mean, they keep developing, and whenever I do them, because what I do is often enough I'll get others to do them, because I say, well, look, it's so simple, you can do it. You don't need to have a training or anything. And people come up with new angles, so you get, for sure, you're always getting new angles, new kind of angles on what they mean and all of that. Um, I don't know about major new experiments, really. I mean, the thing is that your life becomes a continual workshop, in that every situation an opportunity to check out what you are. You never quite learn it, you see, and you have to keep coming back. What are you looking out of now? Well, you can't remember that. You have to look again, and I'm looking out of a single eye. I mean, because I do a lot of workshops, I de I'm developing my style all the time. That's how you learn, is you learn by doing. And so I I take more risks in a way, and um, fun ones. But yeah, so I can't think of any major ones recently, but I'm not sure what a major one is really. But, they're all kind of major and yeah,
Yeah, I was just curious about that.
yeah.
We only have a few minutes, but let me ask you this. In Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, even mystical Christianity, the practice of meditation is a major aspect of the path. What, how does the Headless Way relate to meditation? Like, what's the relationship there from your perspective?
Well, I'm meditating now. I am being aware of my single eye and of this conversation going on in this space, and that's meditation.
Mm,
I suppose that I could distinguish between sitting quietly and still and the rest of my day.
mhm,
And so, if you think of meditation as sitting and being still and quiet, I do that. Um, but I usually do it early in the morning with a cup of coffee. So, you know, but why I say that is that that in essence, it's no different from what I'm doing now at all. The heart of it is being empty for, not knowing, being space for, seeing what is coming out of, emerging in this moment from this mystery that you are. But obviously, if you're still and quiet, different things happen from if you're running around.
mm,
And it is sensible work, rest, and play to have those different rhythms in your life.
mm,
And so the part that being still and quiet plays is that kind of rest and relaxation that comes with that. But it's not better than talking or doing the gardening or dancing or whatever. It's not better than those other things evoke different things, and you need that. It's like Trungpa said, that meditation um, is like a sandwich, and you need filling, you need nourishment. You need something to meditate on. If you're always sitting, you've just got the bread.
mm.
So anyway, I I'm doing a project at the moment where we're working on an archive of materials, and Douglas Harding did these notes for the hierarchy book, and there are 8,000 cards, double-sided, and I've scanned them all, and I'm making notes of them, and we're going to archive them. So it's a kind of slog. It's a laborious job. I'm just sitting hours preparing these things on the computer for my friend Sam to upload to the archive. But I was just sort of thinking, just this is an opportunity just to really explore being the space as you're doing it. And I'm learning the piano and that learning to be space as I play the piano or any situation. That's meditation, two-way meditation, it being who you really are. And it's not preparation, it's enjoyment. It's not doing it so that later you'll be, whatever. It's full on now. And it is glorious. It's glorious. And it's, uh, you, yeah. I mean, you know that, right? You know that. Both of you know that. And that's the joy of it. You see, and I'm only expressing my point of view here, and you've got, different experiences. But we're coming from the same place. And so there's no argument at the center. And yeah.
Wonderful. What's most impressive, I think, about you, other than just being such a super sweet, excellent guy, is that you're super psyched about this. It's been close to 60 years of doing it on a, daily, hourly
Oh,
basis. You've given thousands of workshops. You've introduced huge numbers of people to this through your work in person, on Zoom, every possible way. And yet you are, I mean, you're just as psyched as you were when I met you. That alone is a pretty good sales point for this.
well, I mean, you've found the real deal. and it is energizing, it's fresh, it is miraculous, it is revealing new things every moment, really. You're at the kind of source of the fountain, and it is exploding. And it struck me this week that my experience, it's essentially, it's not going to get better.
Mm.
It does get better. It gets better every day. I mean, it does. But in a certain sense, I don't have to wait. It's full on and now for everyone. And the more you realize that, the more it kind of you feel it, and there's nothing to maintain or keep up. You come back to nothing. There's not, nobody and empty. But I, but your true nature is having a ball, it, and there's a lot of crazy things in the world, but the whole thing that you are, and that the world is a kind of celebration of that, full of tragedy, I know, but yeah. Well, I imagine it's safe for you. I mean, it gets better and better, and you think, wow. I mean, why wouldn't anyone want to drink from this fountain? From this waterfall or this, yeah.
Why not? Well, that seems like an excellent place for us to conclude. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both of you, and a delight to see you again. And happy to do this anytime and just hang out
Hey.
because it's just a way of kind of celebrating
Mm.
who we really are, or who we all really are. And this needs to get out into the world. The world needs it, I think. So thank you for arranging this,
What a
and
pleasure.
great to see you both. Yeah,
Mostly just
yeah,
good to see you. So thanks a lot for being here. And thank you, Damien.
yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right.
Well,
Thank you.
I want to
Thank you.
say thank you to all you listeners, everybody, for joining us again for another episode of Denver's Dzogchen Podcast. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, comment, all the things for the algorithm. And once again, Richard, if you could point us to your website.
Yes, headless.org, and there's an app, Headless Way. It's Android and iOS, and so there are lots that are on that too, and free Zoom meetings. So yeah, lots of ways of connecting up. And thank you both of you again. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. It's awesome.
Have a great day. Thank you for listening.